Hear him, Justin?
Will it be loud when he comes to me?
Here he comes, sweetie. Yeah, he'll be loud.
Look at all that black smoke. Look, he's making lots of smoke.
Uh-huh. You're gonna take a picture and you wait till he gets real close, okay? Justin, stay back.
Oh, scissors hurt my eyes.
No. No.
Oh, yeah, you said something about safety goggles.
Yeah, we're gonna get some tomorrow at Walmart or something. That's not the pretty one.
What is it going to be?
Yeah, he'll come. I'm not real sure, Justin. I told you to stay right in front of me, boo. Use your camera right about there.
Excuse me, please, because you are in the way. I know you're... Oh, Jesus.
All right, all right. Dusty, you ready? Is that car? Dusty, get up close if you're going to take a picture. got to see it at least. I'm happier now. The other guy told me he was in. Yeah, it's green. It's kind of neat.